Hello and welcome to the print. The Israel Hamas conflict or the war has lasted 100 days and it still continues. Amidst all this, it has regional ramifications. You've already seen what is happening in the Red Sea. This is something which has come into play now. The Indian Navy has gone ahead and has deployed at least 12 ships. And as we speak right now, information has just come in that there has been a drone attack on a merchant vessel, and the Indian Navy has boarded the vessel to inspect the this particular merchant vessel. For this, to discuss this further, I have with me Avi Melamed. He's the former Israeli intelligence official and a regional analyst. Now, he went on to serve as the deputy and then as senior Arab affairs advisor to Jerusalem, to two of Jerusalem mayors. Thank you so much for joining us at the print, Avi.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Good morning. My first question to you, Avi, while the conflict is on, you also have the Red Sea situation building up. How do you read this whole situation per se?
These are things that are not detached. They are connected one to the other, and the common denominator is Iran. Look, the war between Israel and Hamas is only the surface of the biggest war that is now evolving in this region, and this is the attempt to basically block the Iranian aggression. Iran has been constantly building a military might across the Middle East, including armies of terror like Hamas, like Islamic Jihad, like Hezbollah, and others. Iran has been building a huge industry of missiles and attacking drones. And the whole purpose of that is, in the end of the day, to make Iran first the regional leader, the regional superpower, and the next phase as a global superpower. What we see right now is that Iran is moving to the next phase in its master plan.
Well, some critics would often say, or people who will come out in support of Iran would say that Iran didn't choose this war; it was forced to get into this war because of the conflict happening between Israel and Hamas. How would you respond to that?
Iran is very cynically using the story of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to advance Iran's interests. Under that excuse, Iran has been occupying Lebanon, Iran is occupying Syria, Iran is influencing Iraq. So the bottom line is very simple. Iran is using the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as a card to further advance Iran's interests. And Iran has an interest that the war will continue and the war will escalate, and Iran is involved in that war.
Well, one of the bigger dynamics that has now come into play are the Houthis of Yemen. The combined forces of US and UK carried out strikes on Houthi installations in Yemen. At the same time, the Houthis have gone ahead and targeted multiple merchant vessels in the Red Sea, and forget the Red Sea, even in the Arabian Sea itself. Uh, where do you see this progressing as far as the Houthis threat is concerned?
Look, it definitely can continue and definitely can escalate. The Houthis are basically holding the world hostage, and to be more accurate, Iran is now holding the world hostage because the Houthis' missiles and drones are not manufactured in Yemen, in the caves and mountains of Yemen. They are being manufactured in Iran, and they are being provided to the Houthis by the Iranians. So today, what we see is Iran holding the world hostage, and the world has to decide whether he wants to continue and to become hostage for the rest of their life, or whether he's going to block that attempt of the Iranians to hold them hostage. There are two roughly ways to do that. One is through diplomacy, the other one is through using military power. It seems like the diplomacy is not really providing the outcome, so you got left with the military power, and the question is to what extent the West is willing, ready, and able to go and to take that path to secure the West's and the world's interest.
Well, that's a very pertinent question that you pointed out. Is it all depends on how much the West is willing to take it, in the sense that to the extent that it wants to go. What do you think would the West do? Do you see this conflict, a conflict which started on a small scale, turning into a much larger conflict? And can the West really do it given the fact that there's already a conflict happening between Russia and Ukraine, and there's a focus which has shifted there? And then there's, of course, there's China and Taiwan, which is there.
Yes, that's correct. There are multi arenas in this world where right now we see the West is also engaged, which is, of course, diverting the attention. But in the end of the day, when we talk about the Middle East, and particularly when we talk about the Red Sea, the Arab Sea, the Indian Ocean, the Bab el Mandeb Strait, this is one of the most strategic locations on this planet, and it's enormously strategically important for the West and the global trade. So you basically got here two options, either to become totally permanently hostage or not. And as I said before, we know exactly where the keys are. The keys are in Tehran with the mullah regime. The West has to decide whether he's going to continue and to put up with the mullah regime aggression, or when he's going to draw a very clear line in the sand to the mullah regime and says, this is where you go, not beyond it. And this is something that I think up until now the West have totally failed actually to do that. And this is, by the way, one of the reasons the mullah regime feels very powerful to continue and to expand its aggression across the region.
Well, as we speak, India's External Affairs Minister, that is the Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar, has finished off his 2-day visit to Iran. He met with the Iranian Foreign Minister. They held deep level of talks. India has spoken about the Chaba port, as well as the corridor, the trade corridor that it wants to establish. With the involvement of Russia. So when you look at all this, India is considered to be close to Israel, is considered to be close to US also, but it is also close to Russia, and it is also close to Iran. So what are your expectations, or how do you see this playing out?
Look, India has a very significant interest globally, and particularly in the area of the Middle East. You mentioned the corridor, both the land and the maritime corridor, that is very significant for India. We know that India has a lot of interest in the region, in the Middle East, in terms of energy security, in terms of food security. These are very significant interests of India. I think that India obviously will deepen its activity in the region, view the Middle East as its own backyard, where the mullah regime, is the one that's setting all the rules, including using of violence. That puts India, like any other player in the region, that puts India in a weaker position. India could find itself very easily becoming also hostage of the Iranian hostility. So I think that this is something that has to be understood. And again, if India wants to secure its interest, India, like the West, and also China, has to send very clear message to the Iranian regime saying this is not your private property. The Middle East is not your private property. The Red Sea is not your backyard. And this is something that is for us a red line. We are dealing with the Iranian regime who is not afraid and feels very powerful to continue and to impose its aggression and influence interest on all the players in the area.
Prior to the Hamas terror attack, the dastardly Hamas terror attack that killed about 1,200 innocent Israeli Jewish lives, the fact was that there was the Abraham's Accord. Israel was going ahead and establishing diplomatic ties with Middle East countries, for example, with the Saudis, with the UAE. But now, because of this conflict, do you think that all of this is a dead cause now, or are these issues which have now gone to the back burner but may come up later?
Look, to the opposite. I think that the players that you mentioned, like Saudi Arabia or United Arab Emirates, they have a lot of interest in having relationship with Israel in a long-term strategic interest. In the back door, they would like to see Hamas vanishing the face of the earth, because Hamas presents a threat to Saudi Arabia, to Egypt, to Jordan, to United Arab Emirates. But then again, it also has to do with the outcome of the big story that we see today in the Middle East, and particularly in the context of restraining the Iranian regime. The Iranian regime currently views the war in Gaza as something that the Iranian regime can exploit, and is doing that. He views the war in Gaza as of now as a situation where the Iranian regime could benefit from that, assuming that Hamas regime in Gaza Strip will not come to an end. And so this is why it's very significant for any kind of like players in the region to make sure that the Iranian arm in Gaza Strip, which is called Hamas and Islamic Jihad, will be cut. And Hamas will not be able to continue and to dictate its radical agenda. If that will happen, I believe that one of the things that we'll see is that it will boost the Israeli-Arab rapprochement, it will boost an Israeli-Saudi dialogue, because it's the interest of those sides.
I know that you're running short of time, so my one last question. I can't, let you get away without my last question on the ongoing Israel-Hamas war. Now, 100 days have, is over, but the war still continues. In your sense, do you think that the Israeli military, the IDF, has been able to accomplish the military objectives that it had set out for when they began this ground assault over 100 days back?
The military objective has to be actually tied to the larger objective. And the larger objective in that regard is, look, you cannot eliminate Hamas. Hamas is not going to vanish. Hamas is going to be around as a political movement and maybe as a sort of like military power, as ideological movement. The idea is not to eliminate Hamas. The issue here is to damage significantly Hamas military capacities and end Hamas rule in Gaza Strip. And by doing that, basically turning Hamas into a player that has a very limited ability to continue and to dictate the radical agenda that Hamas and the Iranians want to dictate. Hamas views itself as a regional player. He was, for the last 40 years, able to dictate its radical agenda backed by the Iranians. So the idea here is not to eliminate Hamas to the last person of Hamas. The idea here is, in the end of the day, to create a situation where Hamas will be shrinked into a position that it will be not any longer able to continue and to dictate its agenda. Now, one of the things that has to be done to that end is to damage severely Hamas military capacities. This is what Israel is doing right now. It's not fully accomplished. It may not be fully accomplished. It's not about hunting down the last rocket of Hamas. It's about, in the end of the day, breaking Hamas military spine and ending its governmental capacities in Gaza Strip and create a new situation in Gaza Strip where Hamas cannot continue to be the player that dictate the reality. It will be probably a player that will be around in the neighborhood as part of the Palestinian people. They will have to deal with this thing. But in the end of the day, the whole idea is to make sure that Hamas will not be able to continue to dictate its radical agenda, that Hamas will become a small-scale player that is not very much relevant.
Well, there you go. Thank you so much, Avi. I look forward to having a conversation with you maybe some other day. I hope in better times when
Hopefully.
the regional threat as well as the threat to Israel is taken care of. Thank you so much for joining here at the Print, Avi. Thank
Of
you.
course. Thank you for having me. Have a good day.